You're listening to the Arkansas AgCast, where we discuss the latest news, trends, and issues impacting Arkansas farmers and ranchers. Our show is brought to you by the Arkansas Farm Bureau Federation and hosted by Rob Anderson and Jason Brown.
All right. Good afternoon. And Jason? No.
Nope.
I have two. I'm actually going to have two special guests today. Someone else sitting over there.
I'm not a special guest.
Well, you're just special.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Special Brian. First up, let me introduce, since you're sitting here, you're on camera. We have Brandi, Carroll, Director of Commodity Activities and Market Information here at Arkansas Farm Bureau. Brandi works with rice and cotton, and you work with the Arkansas Rice Research and Promotion Board.
I do.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Now, normally at this point, Jason and I have a little back and forth about whatever's going on. Not much going on this week, but Senator Bozeman has been touring around the state doing his farm tours. And this morning, earlier this week, he visited White County and Arkansas Farm Bureau members up there. This morning, he was in Stuttgart visiting Terry and Trent Dabbs and their farm, hearing about agriculture issues straight from our farmers and ranchers. Other than that, Brandi, we talk about some things coming up too, and one of those things is our Diversity in Ag Conference, September 14th at the 4 Points Sheraton in Little Rock. You can find out more information about that in our social media on Facebook, Twitter, and all that, and that's coming up, so mark your calendars for that. But Brandi, I want to get started today. We'll just jump right in.
Okay.
You know, no need for chit-chat. We'll jump right in and start talking about something that you work on every week for us, which is what's happening in the commodity markets. And so I thought let's get an update on that. Brandi, what's the big news this week?
Okay. Well, the August supply demand report is the first report of the crop year that really uses farmer survey data to talk about production estimates. So that's always a report that we look for, when we're looking at the markets to see, to really begin to get a feel for what the crop's going to look like. And obviously it's still really early. We don't know exactly what yields are going to be. Harvest is just beginning, but that's one of the things that we try to look at and to sort of get some direction in the market. Cotton has been a big story all year. We had very high cotton prices early in the year, and so we planted a lot more acres across the United States, and even in Arkansas, we planted over 600,000 acres of cotton, and that's the highest acreage we've had in some time, honestly. Or at least that's what the certified acreage report said.
I think we talked about that, I think, a week or two ago. So.
Right. Well, the supply demand report actually had us, and the production report had us a little lower than that. But certified acres from FSA came in at over 600,000 acres. So, and I think that was, you saw farmers responding to the potential for profit in the cotton crop, as opposed to some other crops where inputs were a little higher and prices weren't quite as high. And so we did plant a big crop. We saw a pretty significant drop in prices through the summer, but the crop, particularly in Texas, is not in great shape. It was very hot, very dry. The dryland crop has largely been abandoned. A lot of actually irrigated acres have been abandoned at this point in West Texas. And prices have reacted accordingly. We never want to see high prices at the expense of other farmers, but that has resulted in futures prices back. December is back testing resistance around $1.20, which is a pretty high price level for cotton.
Okay, so good news for Arkansas cotton farmers.
Sure.
Obviously, like you said, we don't like to see it come at the expense of others, but good news on that front.
Right. In Arkansas, we irrigate our cotton, and overall our cotton crop is in pretty good shape. We still have some time to go. It's not finished. We won't be picking a lot of cotton just yet. Right. And it has been a little rainy, which we're going to talk about too. But I
was going to say, I wanted to talk to you about the weather a little bit later, but yes. So.
Yeah. You don't want to see a lot of cloudy, rainy weather on cotton with open bolls because that impacts the quality of your crop. So we're hoping maybe some of these clouds that came a little too late go ahead and move on out of here. if we want to talk about the rice crop, I mean, it's a small crop. Acreage was down even from last year.
Yeah, I was curious about that because obviously rice being what it is for Arkansas, we were such a big rice producer, but this year is looking a little, I mean, it's been a challenging year, obviously, but tell us a little bit more about what the latest is.
Sure. The cost of production for rice was very high this year due to fertilizer prices, diesel prices. So we planted a smaller crop than we normally do anyway, just about 1.1 million acres. But then it's been a even more expensive crop because we've had to continue to run wells and water that rice because we haven't been able to get rain. And, the evaporation is higher the hotter it is. The high nighttime temperatures can also be a factor and impact your yield. So that's one of the things that we're still a little worried about is
Has it been hot? I haven't noticed.
Yeah, a little hot. Yeah. But the high nighttime temperatures impact the way that the grain forms and can impact the milling yield of your crop. And so that impacts how much you get paid for it. So so all of those things are important and things that we've been watching and things that farmers have been really worried about, I would think.
Well, I knew you had some good updates on the cotton and rice, but what are some other things that we're learning about the crops this year across the state? What's the latest on corn, for instance?
Okay, yeah, we can talk about corn and soybeans and whatever you want to talk about. Just across the country, the corn crop is maybe not in great shape, or at least comparatively speaking. We are projected to not really make the trend line yield. We're expected to have lower yields, than usual. Now in Arkansas, again, we irrigate, but a lot of the corn in the country is not irrigated, and so that's where you'll really see that drop in yield. And we've seen the production estimates drop in recent months. So USDA is really expecting that crop to be a little smaller, and that has impacted prices a little bit.
I was wondering if there was going to be a positive for Arkansas growers.
Yeah, I mean, potentially. Prices have been a little more in a sideways pattern, but over the summer, we saw a lot of almost a roller coaster ride in corn futures. They are back up and a little more stable. Resistance right now for December is around 640, which is a fairly good price level. If there were additional cuts to those production estimates, or if yields don't make it, then there's a potential for us to move back above that resistance.
Okay. So again, some potential good news for Arkansas corn growers if their crop is looking pretty healthy.
Sure. Yeah. For soybeans are planted later. And so some of these late summer rains have actually benefited the soybean crop. I do think that overall yields are probably, we're looking at a positive benefit to the soybean crop and to those yields. We have a huge soybean crop. Again, soybeans don't require as much nitrogen as corn and rice. In fact, soybeans put nitrogen back into the soil. So those high fertilizer prices meant we had really a high soybean acreage number to start with, and yield potential for that crop is good in a lot of places, and so we may see kind of a bin buster.
Well, I got to say, I was looking for good news in all of these things because it seems like we've been talking about nothing but negative stuff all summer long. Whether it was weather related and things like that. So it's good to hear some of the positive spin. Thank you for bringing that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Anything else we need to know about what's happening out there with some of Arkansas?
If you want to talk about cattle just a little bit.
Yeah, we don't want to leave out the livestock angle here. Yeah. So if you have any updates on that.
I think, again, along the theme of hot and dry, pasture conditions in many, many places have been very poor. Hay crop has been very poor. And so we've seen very high marketings and high slaughter rates. I do think, all the estimates are for beef production to be much higher at the end of this year than previous years, which is bad news in the short term. Prices are suffering, but long term forecasts for next year, the cattle herd is expected to be smaller because people are not replacing that. Right. Not replacing their herd right now. They're reducing. So.
We've been watching that, and that has been the negative talk that we've had lately. We had talked about some of our people upstairs, some of your coworkers have been doing some reporting on those issues, and the the hay issue, especially, and how that's going to impact. That may have a longer term impact.
Right. I think it will have a longer term impact. It's harder, to replace those animals if you don't know that you're going to feed them, and so you're going to be able to feed them. So we've seen, like I said, longer term the price forecast is higher, but short term, you definitely see a depression in prices based upon the situation.
Well, jumping back to, we hinted at the weather earlier. You were, in fact, on TV the other night, on KATV. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So obviously we've gotten rain lately, and you would think, hey, great, rain, finally. But really that could have been better earlier, because it could present problems coming if there's too much of it coming right now when people are starting to harvest some of the crops. Tell me some of those problems you were talking about.
Yeah, we're not picky at all. We just want rain, how much we want, when we want it, and no other time. But obviously we had a rough spring. We had a very wet spring. It made planting very late, and probably impacted the number of rice acres and corn acres, and probably pushed even more acres into soybeans because people couldn't get into their fields. And then when it got hot and dry, it really did. And so everybody's irrigation bills, I think, are going to be a lot higher than they expected. Number one, because the cost of diesel and electricity is higher than it has been, but also because they've used a lot more of it this year to make sure that their crop stayed healthy and make sure that they had a yield. So, but now, and there are still plenty of soybeans in the field that are probably appreciating this rain, but obviously most of the rice in the state is headed out. Like I think more than 90% of the rice is headed out, which means that we're trying to dry those fields and dry that, let that grain dry in the field so that we don't harvest it too wet, because you can't store wet rice. You need to have that moisture level down. I think I said before, it's not great for the quality of your cotton. If the bolls are set and those bolls start to open, you really don't want a lot of rain on that cotton, because it deteriorates the quality and it impacts how much you get paid for that. And and the longer things sit in the field, if harvest gets delayed, you could always have a hurricane from the Gulf, or some kind of weather event that knocks things down.
It's that time of year.
It's that time of year. So I don't want to sound too negative, but obviously the weather is something that we look at, that farmers are worried about literally every day. I mean, so much you can't control.
And I know that in a lot of cases, there's some people I spoke to some people who went down to see the Bozeman's visit in Stuttgart, and they saw a lot of rice coming out of fields already. Yeah. So, so if a little too much of that rain can upset that operation a little bit.
Right, it certainly can. It it can delay it, and it can. There are a lot of things that can happen. Like if you put equipment in that field when the field is too wet, you really tear up your field. So then you have to do a lot more land prep in order to be able to plant your crop the next year, which again costs money. So the more you disturb that soil and the bigger mess you make, you have to clean that up in order to be able to maintain your land and take care of your land. And so there are a lot of factors that go into deciding when to harvest. You really have to consider your cost. So.
All right. Well, Brandi, we appreciate you being a special guest here today. Anything else you wanted to throw at us? You're got all those stats and figures in your mind. I didn't know if there was anything else, but we appreciate your time. If you'd hold with us for a moment, we're going to step away and learn a little bit about our annual Farm Bureau membership.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you.
Your Arkansas Farm Bureau membership supports our work on behalf of Arkansas farmers, ranchers, and rural communities around the state. From youth leadership programs and academic scholarships to hunger relief and disaster support, and much more. You can make a difference and be a champion for your community. Join today at arfb.com.
Did you know that your $40 annual ARFB membership contributes to the work being done in your local community? We've talked about this a lot lately, and you can learn more by calling your local county office or simply joining today at arfb.com. And speaking of making a difference in your community, I am now joined, in case anyone hadn't noticed, by someone completely different. Our second guest today, Amanda Williams, Director of Arkansas Farm Bureau's Women's Leadership Program, and what we're talking about today, the Farm Bureau Foundation. So welcome, Amanda.
Thank you.
Amanda, the Farm Bureau Foundation launched a summer fundraiser back in June, and that's about to wrap up. As we're getting here toward the Labor Day weekend, we're looking at September, so that's wrapping up. Tell us a little bit about that fundraiser and what you do each summer and why that matters so much.
Okay. Well, as you said, we did kick off our summer contribution drive June 1st. We will wrap that up next Wednesday on the 31st. The goal this year was $4,000. We are currently halfway there. So we are still looking for donations. So you have 6 days left to get online.
So the urgency now, there's days left. We need to meet that goal, so please help us out. But we'll talk more about how they can do that in a second. Go ahead. Sorry.
So with this, I wanted to talk about some of the things that these donations go towards.
Mm-hmm.
So just to give you an idea of what our foundation is, it is the 501c3 nonprofit fundraising arm of the Arkansas Farm Bureau. Mm-hmm. Many of our different programs run through our foundation, and I was going to highlight some of those today while we were on here. One of those being our MASH program. This year we had 21 camps across the state that had 240 students participating in that. Those numbers are down a little bit from pre-COVID, but
right.
We are on the rise on those numbers.
And it's good to see it back again because, again, there was the COVID time that
right.
really scaled that back. But it's good to see it happening again and all over the state. So.
Right. And then also schools are starting back. Most of our Arkansas schools are in session now, and our education efforts also run through our foundation. And so each year, the foundation provides more than $150,000 in educational materials, school garden grant program, educational trailers, teacher workshops, and our grain bin safety programs. With that, we have about 35 to 40,000 pieces of literature that are passed out through county farm bureaus or school programs each year.
That's a lot of literature. But, so, again, we talk about this a lot when school starts, about the ag education element of things, but the foundation supports a lot of those efforts all across the state, really teaching children where food comes from, and really having a better understanding of how it gets from the field to their plate at dinner time when their parents are trying to make them eat the things.
That's right. Yeah. We have staff here on the state level, and then our county farm bureau volunteers are great there on the local level, going into the schools and different programs each year to share the word of agriculture and to teach those kids where their food comes from.
And that's, again, the importance of this fundraiser, that what's going to support all of those efforts and those ongoing programs is your donations to the foundation.
Yes, definitely. We also provide financial support to Arkansas 4-H and FFA youth programs.
Right.
That's one of our big programs. We have several different fundraisers that are not strictly, but are geared more towards those students as well throughout the year. And then, as you and Brandi were talking about with the rain, that makes mention of disaster relief, which is another big portion of our foundation. Since 2016, we have donated more than $140,000 in disaster relief efforts.
Yeah, and that's always, I don't always say it's fun to be a part of because it's not a fun time, but it's I appreciate getting to be involved when those situations, when we do make those donations and presentations and all that, because it's such an important thing. And, because unfortunately sometimes that happens. Brandi mentioned, if there's a hurricane out there that makes its way up here, maybe sits for a few days and there's some flooding, we try and support the recovery in those communities that are impacted by that.
Yeah, we have definitely aided with support for the flooding of the Arkansas River back in 2019. And then this year in the spring, we donated around $23,000 to 4 counties in northeast Arkansas that were affected by the December 10th EF4 tornado event. And that was directly donated to local organizations that were there helping those who were directly affected by that, whether it was for food purposes or for housing purposes or whatever those needs were at that time.
And that's some of the quiet ways that Arkansas Farm Bureau is making a difference in communities, and we call it being a champion in your local community and taking on that role. It's why being a member of Farm Bureau matters, but it's also why these donations matter. Let's talk a little bit about that first. How can they donate to the foundation?
We will. You can always write a check and send into the state office, or you can go online to the ARFB.com website and click on the foundation link there. And then there is a tab that is to give online, and you can click on that, and it takes you directly to our online giving platform.
And that's great. And we're going to be pushing, you may have seen some messaging out there. We're pushing out that link for giving. We're going to have some content in our social media. You'll see some things on Facebook, on Twitter, where we're encouraging you to help us get there in these last few days of this summer campaign. Mm-hmm. So it's easy. It's easy to do. It's, clicks and all that stuff. So just look on ARFB.com, follow us on social media. Anything else that you want people to know about what the foundation is going to be doing in this coming months?
We, of course, at our state convention, we'll have some activities. Our silent auction, our annual silent auction is a fun event that we have at convention, and also is one of our bigger fundraisers for the year. And we are already gearing up for our 2023 trap shoot that will be held June the 9th.
I was going to say that was sort of the launching pad here. We do the trap shoot every year in June, and that's what kicks off the fundraising period. So that was another successful year with that, and so you're already looking ahead.
Yes, trying to plan. This was our biggest one this year, and so we just hope to just keep growing that each year. All
right. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. In fact, thanks to both of my special guests today, Amanda and Brandi. Now it's time for a little history. Amanda, aren't you glad you stuck around? Do you get to learn something today before you leave?
I mean, come on. It's the reason why she's here.
Yeah.
This other stuff was just build up and fluff.
I couldn't get her to come down and join us until I said, but Brian's going to give us some history. And,
it was the selling point.
Yeah.
Well, on this day in 1944, during World War II, you can guess the country, but this country was liberated from Germany occupiers on this day.
France?
Ooh, it was Paris.
Oh, okay.
How about that? He's always on top. He always gets.
Wasn't a tennis question.
He always gets most. He's up on his history. Yeah. I mean, if you get this one, I'll be impressed.
Oh, okay.
We had several birthdays for today. This one was pretty famous. I'm not going to tell you.
I don't get any hints.
Well, I can tell you a few things.
Okay.
1930.
Oh.
It's an actor.
Okay.
Action. He's in a lot of action films. British. Actually, okay, this is going to give it away. British accent, but he's actually born in Scotland.
Is Sean Connery still alive?
Sean Connery.
Okay.
He's not still alive, but he was born.
This would have been his birthday.
It would have been his birthday.
Okay.
Today.
Because I thought Sean Connery, and I was like, oh, wait, are we talking about a living person or deceased?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nope. Sean Connery. It's also Tim Burton's birthday, Elvis Costello.
All right.
So, Regis Philbin.
Regis Philbin.
How about that?
Regis Philbin.
On this day in 2018, this American politician died.
2018?
2018.
George Bush? Or?
Nope. It was close, but it was John McCain.
Oh, yeah.
I actually knew that one.
I'm sorry. I jumped on it. Yeah.
Hey, you should have let her jump in on that one.
I'm sitting here like, it's all for me. All mine. Yeah. I'm sorry.
The other one I found kind of fascinating was in 1835, New York's The Sun began running a series of new accounts that falsely claimed British astronomer John Herschel had observed all sorts of life on the moon, including winged human creatures about 4 feet tall. It became known as the Great Moon Hoax, though the Sun never retracted the stories.
Yeah.
Like,
So, still could be there. All right.
So
thank you.
That's
yes.
I mean, my hodgepodge of useless information is as usual. So.
Well, thanks for doing that. That wraps up news for this week. And special guests, thanks for following along with the Arkansas AgCast. We're grateful for you taking the time to watch and listen. Remember, you can catch the live stream every Thursday at 2 p.m. on Facebook and YouTube. Make sure you turn on notifications to the alerts when we go live. Listen to the audio version later on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We had a little problem last week getting it up, but it's up.
Yeah,
so
it's
be on the lookout. The Arkansas AgCast is brought to you by the Arkansas Farm Bureau and hosted by me, Rob Anderson, and usually Jason Brown. And again, we had special guests today. Thank you again, Amanda.
Yes, thank you for
Our
being
show
here.
is produced by Brian Pistole and Matthew Magdafrau. We'll see you next week.
See you next time.